I'm wedging the clay. The first thing I do is I make sure the wedging table is cleaned off so there's no dry particles of clay there that will mix into your clay. And I'm wedging in a way that is appropriate to the style of work that I do. I'm going to end up with a product here that serves me. Different studios will do it differently, and they're right and I'm right and everybody's right. And so what I'm doing here is I'm rolling forward and my hands are on the ends of the clay, and as I roll forward I push in towards the middle. So I'm cycling the clay in, and as I go forward I cycle the clay out. At each tongue of clay, every time I roll forward, it puts up another tongue of clay. And if there's air bubbles, there, that's an air bubble that popped out. And so this way you're getting the air out of your clay as well as turning it into a homogeneous mass. So it's the same throughout. Sort of like your toothpaste. So then when I do that, then I roll it down into a coil. Tricky movement. So this really packs the clay tight. I have a tight packed roll of clay that then I can measure with 1 finger, 2 fingers, 3 fingers, 4 fingers, or a bigger roll of clay with 2 hands, whatever, to throw with. And so this first piece we're going to throw, a little doggy dish, is going to take about that much clay. So I measure off and I tear off. And then what am I going to make? The second one, which is what? A flower pot. And so I'll take that much clay. And the third one is a double curved cup, and that's probably perfect for that. So clay doesn't stick to dry. So if I put this down on this dry board, the clay doesn't stick. It doesn't stick here. But if you dampen it, it will stick. If you make it really sloppy wet, it'll slip. But if you just dampen it, the clay sticks. You put it down in the middle, it sticks. It doesn't have to be exactly in the middle, but the closer you are to the middle, the easier the rest of the process will be. So the first thing we have to do is put the clay in the center. So what I'm going to use predominantly is the heel of the left hand, the fingers of the right hand. I'm going to wrap my hands around the clay, but the main thrust is, and my elbows are on my legs, so I'm really supported. If I don't, the clay is going to move my arms, so I have to support my arms. And then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze in and pull toward me. Pulling the clay toward you is the key to centering. Pulling the clay toward you is the key to centering. I said that twice because it's really important. Now you can push away from you, it will do the same thing, but I like to only teach it in one way so there's no confusion and you get in the habit of doing it one way. So it's easy to center a narrow lump of clay. If you put a wide lump, a big fat lump of clay, a wide lump of clay on the wheel, it's very difficult to get that in the center. The first thing I do when I put a lump of clay on is I pull it in narrow and I pull toward me. So that brings it into the center and makes it narrow. It's easy to center a narrow lump of clay just by pulling it toward you, if it's narrow. So then I'm going to squeeze it together and cone this up in the air. Even though I've wedged the clay, it's irregularly twisted. And so by coning it up in the air and then pushing it back down, it spins the whole mass into center. So it makes it much easier to throw clay that is all running in the same direction. So the first thing we're going to make is this little low wide dish, and so I'm going to make a low wide disc on the wheel head. The right hand lays on with the thumb right next to the center. So the exact center is right in the middle of that thumbnail. This hand naturally lays on the right side of the clay, such as this. The middle finger goes right on the top, and so those two nails are right alongside each other, and the index finger crosses over the knuckles, so I can actually grip my hand with the left hand. I can grip the right hand, and gives me one big hand instead of two separate hands. And so now I'm going to open down with the middle finger of the left hand. The finger next to it can go down with it. I open down, and then I'm going to open out to the right. I don't change my position, nothing changes. The clay is going to run on the right side of that finger, and I open down to the right. And as I open out, this right thumb, which is right there, it doesn't go down in the clay, it rides on top, and I open out and compress down with that thumb, and that will spread the clay onto the wheel head, allowing me to make a wider dish of clay. Then I'm going to do what I call squaring the bottom. I'm going to use the pad of the middle finger of the left hand. I use the pad because it's sort of spoon shaped. If I use the end of the finger, I'm going to push up a groove of clay. I don't want to do that. If I use the pad of the finger, I won't do that. And I'm going to use the right hand for stability. So I push down gently, and I go right out to that outer wall. So I'm compressing the clay down onto the wheel head, kind of making the foundation of a house. You know, you want a stable foundation. Then I'm going to set the rim. The thumb and index finger of the left hand gently supports that rim, and I use the index finger of the right hand to push down in between. And I'm going to push in with my left thumb slightly towards the center to bring this wall in. Okay, so there we have this wheel. Now we've opened down, we've opened out, squared the bottom, set the rim, and now I'm going to undercut. I'm going to push out with the middle finger. You always use the middle finger on the inside. It is the longest finger. It's the finger that hits the bottom the first when you're throwing taller pieces. So you use that middle finger and you open out slightly. You push in with the index finger of the right hand, and you gently squeeze together, and you lift these fingers up and in towards the middle. I want the wall to go up and in as opposed to straight up or up and out, because with the centrifugal force of the wheel, the clay always wants to go out. So if you learn how to make the clay go in from the very beginning, you're ahead. Then I'm going to undercut again. I push out with the index finger. I push, out with the middle finger, in with the index finger. Now it may appear as if my fingers are coming up opposing each other, but they are not. Actually, the index finger, the outside finger, is coming up underneath the inside finger. As it gets to the top, they come much closer together to squeeze out that thickness. The inside finger rolls onto the top, and the outside keeps pushing in to give me a straight line there. Okay, so now I'm going to take my wooden rib, which I will get. I'm going to take this wooden rib, and you hold it with a thumb and the middle finger across from each other, index on top, third finger on the bottom, so you can support the whole rib. And I don't go straight in, because if I do that, clay starts peeling off. We don't want that. But if I put it in an angle this way, the clay is going around, the clay will go past that rib. So I'm going to push the clay out onto the wooden rib and gently compress the clay up, giving me a nice, firmly packed wall, and I'm going to set the rim. You always set the rim after every pull. Like every time you write the letter T, you cross it. Every time you make an I, you dot it. Well, every time you make a lift up, you set the rim. Now I'm going to use this flexible outside rib, which is flexible, it will bend. I'm going to use the thumb and middle finger across from each other, index on the top, third finger on the bottom, so I can arc it if I want to. Here we're not going to arc it, but I'm going to compress the clay onto that rib and lift it up. I get to the top, I just lift off. I don't squeeze out, making a knife edge up here at the top. I want to leave the wall the same thickness at the top as the sides are. Now with this little wooden rib, you can take it and just with the point of it, push in and then down, giving this dish a little foot. It has a little beginning in it. It casts a little dark shadow down there, and if you want to push down a little bit to give it a little rim at the top, you can do that. And so this is the first little step. Wire, you push down with your fingers so you pull the wire through as close to the pot as possible. If you're way far away from the pot, the wire will want to lift up in the middle, and sometimes you'll end up without a foot. And if you dry your hands, you can lift this up carefully, and then you set it down the same way, just the opposite of how you lifted it up, and it should pretty much maintain its shape.